Session 7, I got confused by the date. The topics that we won't cover that are in the book is the topic of the design is bad. If there were a God, God wouldn't have designed it this way, which is pretty presumptive argument, because that assumes they would design it better, and if they could design it, which is to me a specious argument completely. And there's a very good article in there about the eye, where there's a lot of folks that say the retina is on the wrong side of the eye, that the blood vessels are in front of the retina, which is true. The reason they're in front of the retina is that they cool the retina. And not only that, but there's a light source. There are cells on the lens side of the retina. It's sort of like a skin on the inside. It's not the retina, but it's on the lens side. And these actually turned out to be photomultiplier cells. So that when light hits that cell, it gathers all the light and multiplies it, and it's directly connected to a retina cell. So it goes through the blood capillary membrane.
Wow.
And is more efficient than if there was a retina in front and the blood vessels behind. So that's a silly argument, and it's an argument of ignorance, because until just recently, no one really knew how the eye did what it did.
Wow.
And that's also the thing about vestigial organs. They're vestigial because people can't figure out what they do. Like for a long time, people said I think there were 75 vestigial organs in the human body. Now there aren't any. Kind of interesting. And then they also said that the chromosomes in our genome were mostly junk because they didn't code for proteins. Well, it turns out the parts that don't code for proteins are actually the operating instructions. So you need them too. You just don't code for proteins. It's like, what sequence of the proteins, how many proteins, what do you turn on, what do you turn off, the Hox genes, all of those things. Now you don't hear much about junk DNA anymore, because people are starting to get very, well, maybe there isn't much junk DNA. But today, we're going to cover a very interesting topic. Remember, here's our worldview.
There we are.
There we are. Where are you? Are you on the left or are you on the right? And that means however you organize your thoughts, that's how you see information. Same information, different organizations. And I want to take this quote in particular from Richard Lewontin, who is a very famous evolutionist and biologist and geneticist. And he says, we take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs. And the one thing he says is, in spite of the tolerance of scientists for unsubstantiated just-so stories. What's a just-so story? It's, children call them fairy tales. We call them flights of fancy, right? Because we have a prior commitment, and that commitment is to materialism, because no matter what the explanation, it has to be material. Because we can't have God in the equation, because they don't want to have God in the equation. So really, we're going to talk about unsubstantiated just-so stories today, otherwise known as human origins. Okay? Adam. Was Adam the son of God? Okay? Or was Adam the son of Eve? Which one? You're taught in school it's Adam the son of Eve, right? In fact, there wasn't any Adam. So let's look for the evidence. If the evidence for evolution of human is true from some pre-existing ape ancestor, there should at least be two proofs, and one is his fossil record and the other one is a mechanism for change. And we've talked a lot about a mechanism for change, and we've talked a lot about a fossil record. If these aren't If these are absent, then the only real alternative is special creation by God. Remember that it's materialism or special creation. And if you go back to Lewontin, he says we can't allow the divine foot in the door. So every explanation that you get will be something that will not be a creation story, possibility. The history of mankind. Evolution begins with the assumption that we evolved from ape-like ancestors. So I want you all, this is an exercise, please pick your grandparents.
Uh-oh.
Okay, the one in the middle, by the way, in the top row is what? Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis. The Bible teaches that God created man. So, and there it is, in Genesis chapter 1:27, God created man in his own image, in the image of God he created him, male and female. So school textbooks, Holt, Reinhardt, Winston, okay? Look closely at your hand. You have 5 flexible fingers. Animals with 5 flexible fingers are called primates. Primates most likely evolved from small insect-eating rodent mammals that lived about 60 million years ago. Okay, what part is fact and what part is just so story? Which part is the fact?
Yellow.
The yellow, right? Which part is the making this story up?
And why?
In white. And there's no evidence for it. They're just, that's a philosophical
likely.
statement. There's a philosophical statement. It's most likely. You won't say, we evolved. If you listen to the Discovery Channel documentaries, and you read something in the newspaper, it'll be most likely, could possibly, might have happened, in some possible way. Everything is couched in very vague terms, but the impression that's left with you is that's the way it is.
And it's in a textbook.
Let's talk about who remembers Java Man. Some of the older folks here remember Java Man. When you were in high school or college, Java Man was the quintessential ape man. Okay, so Eugene Dubois, a Belgian, in 1891, he was in the I think Borneo, and he was in this looking for fossils, and he was in the stream bed, and he found a skull cap. Okay, and then 45 feet away, he found a thigh bone, and in between, he found some jaw pieces. He said, "This is a fossil," and he named it Pithecanthropus erectus, which is really and that is ape man. Okay? And he said it was 500,000 years old. Now, how did he know that? So, if you found a piece of something here buried, and you found a piece of something out in the hall buried, would you assume they came from the same critter? He did. And Rudolf Virchow, who was regarded as the father of paleontology, said at the time of the discovery, way back when, in my opinion, this was an animal, a giant gibbon, in fact. The thigh bone is not the slightest connection with the skull. But for years and years and years, it was in our textbooks, in fact, it was in my textbook, that this was an ape man. And human fossils were also found in Java, why did I say Burma, it's Java, in the same area, dating about the same, see the word sign? Sign means someone figured out that was the age. There was no way to determine what it is, and they called it Java Man. In fact, these were real humans, okay, dated at 500,000 years ago, and leading authorities at the time, yeah.
So Ron, they didn't carbon date the fossils?
There was no carbon dating back in those days. And mostly fossils are not carbon dated. Usually it's strontium or argon dated. Because carbon dating only goes back 50,000 years. Okay?
It's not
And oh, by the way, all these fossils have radioactive carbon in them. All fossils do. In fact, diamonds do. So the people who date pick this. And they date a specimen with many different methods, and they'll date it many, many, many times. They'll have like maybe 21 different samples, and there'll be 21 wildly divergent dates, but they will pick the one that is the one that's what they think it should be. Okay? And remember the thing about the index fossils and the layers down? They'll pick the one that is like the index fossil for that layer, and all the others they'll just throw away. But you never hear about that part. You know, the pick and choose operation. But Dubois had this really cranky idea that there was a fixed ratio between skull size and long bone size. And that's what, so gibbons were this, and orangutans were that, and humans were this. And he insisted that this thing that he found was a human. I mean, a human intermediate with an ape. And it was only because of that. But really, today, everyone realizes that Java Man is, in fact, a variation of humans. And since 1950, the anthropologists and textbooks have called it Homo erectus. Okay, so Homo erectus is just somebody, is a Javanese. It's just a regular human.
So how old is this?
Well, it's not 500,000 years old.
Not that.
Suffice it to say, it's human.
I mean, they're contemporaneous. In fact, you'll find Java men skeletons buried alongside Homo sapiens skeletons, modern, what we would call European. So remember, these people who were doing this excavation were Europeans. And anything that didn't have the structure of a European face and body had to be part ape. It is very racial.
Yeah,
Okay?
wow.
Very, very racial.